Hi, Autumn. Thank you so much for joining us in this podcast episode. I really appreciate it. I know you have a busy schedule for taking the time out. So, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
You're most welcome. The pleasure is ours. So, we get to learn something different, like you in a attorney space. So, we never had any attorney in our podcast episodes. So, yeah, it will be like interesting to know how you got started in a law space and what made you change. Right now, you're coaching with other lawyers like yourself, coming out of from different situations they're having. So tell us about like how you got started with the law.
Yeah, that's a good question and one that I haven't been asked in a long time, to be perfectly honest. I initially wanted to be a lawyer, just having grown up in a farm
Mm,
in a small community. My parents hadn't gone to college. And so they made it pretty clear to myself and my three brothers that they wanted something
yeah,
different for us. And so it was not a matter of if we went to college and schooling beyond that, it was sort of, what we were going to do
yeah,
was the only option for discussion. And so my brothers became lawyers or doctors and a cop. And then I figured, well, it kind of leaves the law to
the law.
me. But it was a good fit. I always
Yeah,
really enjoyed public speaking. And I think as a woman growing up in a small town on a farm, surrounded by a lot of men and three brothers, you learn pretty quickly the differences, I think, in how women are treated and how our opinions are received. And I think as a young girl, it brought up a lot in me. And I think
yeah,
I was a challenging child because of that, and
right.
had a lot of go rounds with my father. And so it just made sense to kind of channel that energy into being an advocate for other people. So I think that's kind of how it started initially.
Yeah.
Not having any lawyers in the family, I wasn't really sure what this whole world of practicing law was
Your
about.
parents wasn't like lawyers, right?
No, my dad was a farmer, and my
Yeah.
mom always worked on the farm. And as we got older, she eventually got a job off of the
Mm,
farm. And that was like, mind
yeah,
blowing to not have mom around. And so just kind of seeing that transformation in her as well,
yeah,
how empowering it can be to have a job and have your own income, really instilled in me the desire to have a job that I could take care of
yeah.
myself.
So how long have you been in the law? So practicing as a lawyer?
13 years. Yeah. So
So over a decade.
out of say that again.
Yeah, over a decade. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy
Yeah.
to think. I mean, it goes so fast. And I think the early years of practicing law
Yeah.
are just full of chaos, and it's kind of a whirlwind. And for someone like me, not having a lot of access to lawyers,
Mm.
there were a lot of years just kind of wandering and trying to figure it out early on.
Yeah. It's just a process, isn't it?
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah. So right now you are coaching
Mhm.
lawyers, like you're doing life coaching, especially with the lawyers. So what made you to do like a coaching instead of I know you're practicing law as well, like you're working for a company, and then you made the change. When the change happened, like you realized, no, I need to coach other lawyers on a mindset game and things like that.
Yeah, it came from my own experience with coaching. When I was a young attorney, right out of the gate, I was
Yeah.
super unhappy. A lot of pressure. I felt very out of place.
Mhm.
A lot of, men, not a lot of people of color, certainly not a lot of women,
Yeah.
just really uncomfortable. And then you add to that the complexities and the pressures of practicing. And so I knew something needed to change for
Yeah.
me. And so I think, like a lot of professionals, when you find yourself really unhappy, it's like, well, I just need to change jobs. Like that's going to fix everything. I'll just go to another firm and everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. And I went to another firm, and I was a young attorney, and they hired me to kind of build the whole practice area. This firm didn't have my specialty.
Right.
And so here I am, a young female attorney, and it was a mid-sized firm, but it was even more kind of Midwestern white men, not a lot of minorities, not a lot of women. And I go there. And once the shine wore off, I realized that I was just right back to being really unhappy and miserable. And now I had this big task and all these
Mhm.
expectations placed upon me. So I went and I found a coach who was also a female attorney, still
Right.
practicing law. And with her help, I was really able to kind of figure out why I was so unhappy and take my own ownership of that piece of it.
Yeah.
And in some ways, just let go of being angry about practicing law and the negative pieces of practicing law. And so she really helped me to turn it around and build this amazing team and be able to help women and young attorneys that I
Yeah.
hired to have more balance and happiness. And so, that was all good for many years. And then I ended up transitioning to go in-house counsel for a big company.
Right.
A lot of reasons why that sort of happened. It kind of came out of the blue,
Yeah.
but essentially I did that. And then I found myself again, really missing that opportunity to help young attorneys and help them develop. And so I thought, this is really my chance to get back to that. And I'm going to do something with the experience
Yeah.
that I had. And I'm going to get my certifications and give back to that community and make sure that women have that space and that ability to kind of change and find their own happiness. So it was sort of out of necessity for me.
Yeah. So you saw the problem is happening for you, then you realize not run away from it, just do something about it, make the change. A lot of
Yeah.
women are going through the same situation like you having. So what was the actual situation like? What's the problem actually you having during the time, and what made you that? Yeah.
Gosh, it's so interesting. I right now I have a group of women that I'm
Yeah.
coaching, and I
Yeah.
don't often do group coaching. And so it's something I'm playing around with. But what's so beautiful about getting a bunch of young women attorneys in a room together is they have these moments where they're like, are you living the same life as me? Because I'm feeling that, and I'm feeling that, and I'm having that challenge, and I'm having that struggle. And so I think it's struggles that a lot of us just have as young professionals, that
Mhm.
insecurity, that uncertainty about your skill set. But I think for women, it's a little bit unique because we look around and we don't see a lot of people like us. And
Yeah.
when you look at the statistics, women and minorities leave firms at alarming rates. And, I don't know if I could point to exactly what the root of it is, but what I see in my clients is they internalize a lot of the negativity that's sort of given to them. I think in, law firms and any, high pressure profession,
Yeah.
a lot of the feedback you get is negative, right? If it's good
Yeah.
feedback, you never hear it. But if it's bad, you're absolutely going to hear about it. And I think lawyers, especially, they're used to being the best and the smartest in the room. And now they're in this world where everybody's smarter than them, especially as a young attorney. That's the
Yeah.
nature of it. And now all you're getting is this negative feedback, and they just internalize it. There's no opportunity, excuse me, to stop and really question, is this really true? Am I really failing? Or
Mhm.
is it just the negativity bias of the people around me? And, is there more to this story that I'm just not hearing? Instead of asking those questions, they take it to mean that they don't belong and they're not good enough. And then they look
Yeah.
around and they see people that don't look like them. And it just kind of entrenches this idea that they don't have what it takes. And then I think, like I did, they leave and they go to another
Yeah.
job hoping it's going to be different. And they spend their whole career kind of moving from job to job, never really connecting the dots with the fact that they need to take more control over what they're believing about themselves and what
Yeah.
they make all of that feedback mean. So, that's kind of just a small sliver of it, but I think that really is something I see in all of my clients.
Yeah. Interesting that. So did it really actually affected your personal life and your professional life both, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think um, this is, kind of an interesting story. When I moved to that firm to kind of engage
Yeah.
in that practice building, at the time I was married and I was in an abusive relationship, an abusive marriage. And it was really interesting to me to leave that abusive relationship, very unhealthy relationship, and then still be in practicing law.
Yeah.
And you see some of the parallels.
Yeah.
And what I say to my clients is the way that we do one thing in life is how we often do all things in
Everything. Yeah.
life. And for me, that was very true. In my practice early on, I would get negative feedback. That shouldn't have
Mhm.
taken that long. You totally missed the point. Like, what the heck were you thinking? And then I would take that and I would beat myself up about it. And I would scramble like frenzied, like, I just got to do this one thing to make that partner happy. And we spend all of our energy just trying to get one little kernel of feel good from that
Yeah.
person. Like, that is an abusive dynamic. And that's a lot of kind of what we live in. And we don't even realize that we're doing it. And we really become addicted to those little pieces of good feedback and those feel goods. And we ride this like crazy wave of highs and lows. That was very troubling for me to kind of see the parallels between the two. And it's not to say that law firms are, terrible, toxic environments. It's how we put all of our worth on
Yeah.
that little piece of positive feedback and all the negative feedback. And everything that we believe about ourselves is all contingent upon what this one person tells us. It's just so unhealthy.
Yeah, definitely. Like, especially you putting the long hours and working, like you putting your heart and soul on it. And
Yeah.
obviously, studying law is not like you just getting a college degree. You need to go university and then practice and then work under another law firm and get the experience, then becoming something. So it's a long journey. Then after that, like doing all of the hard work, don't get appreciated what you worth, then it's
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah. And
something. Yeah.
And I think a lot of my clients really, their identity becomes so enmeshed in it. And especially,
Yeah.
it's interesting. A lot of my clients are first generation college educated or they're first generation immigrants. There's a lot of pressure there and the
Yeah.
prestige that we get with these fancy degrees, and then we're unhappy. It's
Yeah.
like, well, I have this fancy degree and I'm really unhappy and my family's so proud and think I can do all these things, but I really can't. It causes all this internal chaos. And then you add to it, they realize they're unhappy or they're thinking about leaving the
Mhm.
law and like, well, I can't, this is who I am. I'm a lawyer. And
Yeah.
I just said this to my group last night. It's crazy to me that we go to law school in the US for 3 years
Yeah.
and we take that to mean that now for the next 60, this is what we've got to do. Like
Yeah.
nowhere in our world do we do that. My undergraduate degree was 4 years and I majored in religious studies. And it doesn't bother me one moment that I do nothing with it today.
Yeah.
But if we took 3 years of law school, it's like, gosh, we've got to do it forever. And we really, kind of put the blinders on because we make it mean so much about who we are and what we're worth and what other people think that means about us.
Yeah, it just becomes your label, like who you are. It's like you become an athlete. If a football player is a football player. If a baseball player is a baseball player.
Yep.
So when you go to like law school, then you realize I'm a lawyer already. So like everyone call you as a lawyer. Like you're not like the same person like who used to be when you go to normal college and getting a normal degree, like
Yep.
you mentioned, psychological degree. No one called you like, oh, you are a lawyer. But since you moved to like even the first year of your law college, then you're become a lawyer. So that's the
Yep.
identity things. Like if you're not happy with your workplace and you need to quit, it's like a whole world is like a breaking down, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what's really interesting when I push my clients on that question, like, why does it matter that you're a
Yeah.
practicing lawyer? You'll always have the law degree.
Yeah.
And when you push and push and push that line of questioning, why does it matter? What does that mean? What it ends up meaning to them is I'm a lawyer, so I'm good enough. I'm
Mm,
smart. I'm doing a good job. And what I always tell my clients is you can believe any of that now. You could
yeah.
believe that as a garbage man. The law degree is not permission for you to believe that you're good enough.
Yeah.
That concept alone is really difficult for my clients to kind of embrace because they see it as so intertwined. Like, I can only believe that because I've done all these things. And it's like, no,
Mhm.
like you are good enough. And it doesn't
Yeah.
matter what you do for a living or with that law degree or if you use it. That's the shift that I really try and get my clients to see because when they can let go of the power of that label and
Yeah.
what they do day to day, then it's like, nothing that I do changes my worthiness. So I just get to do whatever I want to do. But it sounds easy to say, but it's very difficult for us to internalize.
Yeah, but it takes a long process, but actually you crack onto it, then it's so much easier to process it and so much easier to accepting the current situation you're having at the moment.
Yeah.
And yeah, so going back to like a topic which one we you're really passionate about it, and I want to learn more about that. So there's three sentences. So owning your power, owning your thoughts, and owning our happiness. How does
Mhm.
it make sense to you? What do you mean by like owning your power? So let's stick to the first one, and we go back to another two. So what is like owning our power?
Yeah, so an example that comes to mind, I was meeting with a client a couple days ago, and
Mhm.
I was really sort of challenging her to explore some of the things that she had said.
Yeah,
And one of the things that she had said to me was, "Well, I can't quit my job." And
right.
I said, "Is that a fact or is that a thought, right? Is that an opinion that you have, or is that like a universal truth?" And she's
Yeah,
like, "No, it's a truth. It's a fact." And I said, "You're not chained to your desk. You're not an indentured servant.
yeah,
If you truly didn't want to go to work tomorrow, you can absolutely not go to work tomorrow." And I always say, you don't have to pay your taxes. We choose to do it because we
yeah,
don't want to commit tax fraud and we don't want to go to jail. And we choose to show up to our jobs because we want to pay our bills. We want to have money in the bank. Recognizing that those are choices, that's owning your power. But a lot of times in our world, it's like, well, I have to do these things. I have to, cook dinner. I have to pick my kids up from daycare. Not really. There are a lot of horrible people in this world who don't pick up their kid from daycare. They don't cook dinner, right? Like,
yeah,
because they are choices. When we can recognize that all those things that we do in every moment of every day is a choice and we could choose something differently, that's power.
yeah,
And so I always say, the first thing we have to do is just recognize like we are not a slave to anything in our world. In every moment of every day, I get to choose. Do I show up? Do I not show up? Do I do the work? Do I not do the work? Do I disappear and drop off the face of the planet? I could do that. You know,
yeah,
that's what I mean by owning your power, is really challenging the structure that you live within and
mhm,
believing that it's just happening to you and that you have to do all these things. So it's about recognizing choices, because from there we can make different choices that serve us, choices that resonate with us, or just feel more in control of our life and just recognize, I'm not
yeah.
quitting my job because I want to pay my bills. That feels very different than I can't quit my job, right? One's very heavy and one's very like empowered.
Yeah, so that gives you like a more power of yourself. Like it calms you down, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, like when we think about, no, I have no choices, I have to pay my bills, I'm gonna get bankrupt, then the burden is too big. And
Yes.
it's like everything, like the mountain, similar to the bigger situation is happening. But when you think about, no, I have the choices, I don't want to go to work tomorrow, I can take a leave 6 months, or I'm gonna quit this profession and do something else. That's
Hmm.
just more like you owning your life. So that's how like we create like a suicidal thoughts and things like that. When
Hmm.
we compare with other things and make ourselves like I have no choices, then we realize there is no way out of my life. There is no
Yeah.
solution for our life. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah. It's a heavy place to be when you
Yeah,
believe that, like, well, I have to do all these things and I've got all these burdens. Like, the energy that that brings to your life it's heavy and it's dark and it's dense. And I think it's really important to recognize that, because when we recognize that our thoughts create an energy, a
yeah,
vibration, we have to start really looking at, okay, what energy do I want my life to be driven by? Most of
yeah,
us don't want our life to be driven by disempowerment and feeling obligated and heavy,
mm,
and so when we recognize that the thoughts we're choosing create an energy that's not conducive with what we want, not only do we have a power to choose something more, but it's like, okay, well, I can choose something that creates an energy that gets me closer to where I actually want to be. And
yeah,
it's a beautiful thing.
yeah, definitely. So let's get to owning our thoughts. So I know
Mhm.
we talked about owning our power. So what's owning our thoughts?
Yeah, it's kind of the second step, right? I mean, the first step is just recognizing that we have all these sentences in our heads
Yeah,
and all these choices that we make in every moment. We can choose something different. From there, it's a matter of choosing what we want to believe. My client said,
mhm,
"Well, I can't quit my job."
yeah,
For her, it can be as simple as choosing the thought, I choose to show up to work every day because I want to pay my bills, or I'm lucky to have a job that pays me six figures, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Those thoughts are available to her in that moment, and they're going to make her feel very different day in and day out at her job. And so that's what I mean by it's the second step, right? Like I can make any choice I want. I'm going to choose a thought that creates a feeling for me that's really more in line with where I want to be and where I want to go next. And so we all have those thoughts available to us, but sometimes it's hard to generate energy, and it's
Yeah.
not worthwhile to choose a thought that doesn't elicit an energetic response. Like when we were talking about my clients that associate being a lawyer with I'm worthy, I'm valuable, I'm successful, I always tell them, like, you can believe that and do whatever you want to do, but
Yeah.
they don't, and they can, parade around thinking I'm worthy and I'm good enough. But if they don't believe it, it's never going
Yeah.
to elicit energy to carry them in the direction that they want. So sometimes we have to kind of take baby steps. Being a
Yeah.
lawyer isn't my identity. Maybe that's the first step that gets them closer to believing I'm good enough no matter what I do. And so it's not just about choosing thoughts, it's about choosing thoughts that elicit an emotion, right? You have
Mhm.
belief and buy-in behind it, and it's an emotion that's useful for where you want to go.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting way to think about. So yeah, we own the thought. So that is the control. So that leads to like your third one we're going to talk about, which is owning our happiness. So if
Mm-hmm.
we know how to choose our thoughts, then obviously there is a way to go to the happiness. And I want to like explain to us like how we own our happiness. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people doesn't know that. They probably think, oh no, my when my wife gonna love me or my husband gonna love me, then I'll be happy. When I'm
That's
gonna
it.
make the X amount of money, I'll be happier. Or when my boss gonna praise me, I'm gonna be happier. But when you trying to say like we own our own happiness, what do you
Mm-hmm.
mean by that? Do we actually control our happiness, or do you think like it is other side?
Yeah, I think, I love the examples that you gave. Like if my boss gives me feedback, if my husband loves me, or if I'm married, then I'm going to
Yeah,
be happy. And I always challenge people. I say, explain to me how that works. If your boss says you're doing a great job, what creates that happiness? Because he's not like zapping me with something that like implants that feeling in me.
yeah,
What actually happens in between those things is I agree with him. I'm doing a good job. He thinks I'm doing a good job. I'm good. I'm worthy, whatever it may
mm,
be. That thought, that's what's creating the happiness. It's
yeah,
sort of like if I'm walking down the street and a stranger says to me, I really don't like you. I'm going to be like, well, that was weird, and
yeah,
I'm going to keep on walking. It's not going to hurt my feelings. If my fiance says to me, I really don't like you, that's going to hurt because my
yeah,
thoughts are going to be, what did I do? Is he upset with me? Oh my goodness, like what's going on? And I'm going to freak out. Those thoughts are what create the negative emotion. It's not the words, because the words from the stranger had no impact on me,
yeah,
because my thoughts were that was weird. That was strange. I don't know what that's about. And I just kept on moving. So when you take that and you kind of apply it big picture, even in my own experience, I went to another firm thinking I was going to be happy and I wasn't. My clients have these amazing resumes and all these accolades, and they're not happy because
yeah,
none of those things create that for them. They get like a momentary feel good from getting the thing checked off their list, but it doesn't last because they don't have existing long-standing beliefs that create happiness for them. A lot of times when they're chasing those things, the job, the money, the marriage,
yeah,
it's because only then will they allow themselves to believe I'm good, I'm happy, I'm successful, whatever the thought may be. And then they feel happy for a minute, but it doesn't last because it's not a real thought that they're really connected with. They're tying it so closely to something that it's not a thought that they're used to practicing day in and day out. So they just look for one more thing to
yeah,
allow them to believe that for a moment, and they just keep chasing it. So, you know, with me, when I went to another firm, like I was just as unhappy again over time. And I think for a lot of people, when you look back at those things that we chase to try and create happiness, what we'll find is the happiness wears off. And then we go to the next thing, and we go to the next thing, we go to the next thing. And usually the way that we end up feeling in every one of those instances is very similar to how we were
Yeah.
feeling before, because our neural pathways that created that discomfort and created that unhappiness, wherever you go, there you are
It's
with
gonna
those neural
follow.
pathways. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that thinking will follow you. And so, unless and until you do the work to create other neural pathways that run just as regularly, I'm good enough, I'm worthy, it doesn't matter what I do. If that's not your everyday elevator music, you're never going to find happiness anywhere.
Yeah. So it needs to be like a change within ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So happiness doesn't really come from like outside world. Like even those, for example, like a spouse, your spouse not gonna make you happy. You're probably gonna think she's making you happy or him making you happy. It's not actually them. It's about you. How you
Yep.
finding the situation. Sometimes, even though me and my wife, even though we argue, like I find it funny because I'm taking it like whatever is happening with you, I don't really care. It's about me. I'm happy at the moment because
Yeah.
it doesn't come from like a you. I'm happy, that's why we are happy. It's not because of like you're happy then you're making me happy.
And I
So
think that's a really good insight for couples,
yeah.
especially because there's this idea that this other person's supposed to make you happy. And
Yeah.
it's like, no, you're really believing like I have a good relationship. We get along very well. Like those thoughts are what are making you feel happy and content in the moment.
Yeah.
And that other person doesn't control that. And so it kind of creates this weird, unhealthy dependency on each other, which again really prevents us from doing our own work to clean up our own thoughts and invest in our happiness on our own. And that's not to say that I think we should be happy all of the
Mm.
time. And I get that pushback a lot, like, oh, I'm just supposed to think happy thoughts every day all the time. Like that'd be great. And my
Life doesn't
answer
go
is
like that way.
no, it does. Yeah. And I reference the yin and yang a lot in my practice. And I think it's a beautiful illustration of life is good and bad. And in all
Yeah.
good, there's a little bit of bad and vice versa. And humans are the same way, and your job is the same way. We are the same way.
Yeah.
And when we can recognize that, okay, today's a bad day, like I'm in the 50-50 of my life, tomorrow's going to be better. And
Yeah.
this 50-50 is awesome because it lets me know when I'm in the good. Like it serves a purpose. And when we can embrace that part of our life and be open to it in the same way that we can embrace happiness, it's like we let go of this struggle. Like nothing is
Definitely.
wrong here. I'm having a bad day. I'm not in a good headspace, and that's all right. Like it's nothing that needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
This is the balance.
Yeah. So same analogy works like spouses. So that can work in a workplace as well. Like
Yeah.
you mentioned, like you change your workplace, went to a different company and trying to find like a scenario would be changed, but it didn't really happen. Only
Hmm.
thing what you did is you change yourself. You solved your problem within yourself, not the company owner, not the whoever above you, like your manager or whoever your senior level. You
Hmm.
change within yourself, and then you started to find out the happiness because the whole
Yeah.
environment changed within yourself, right?
That's it, right. And if, to take it a little bit more granular,
Yeah.
we have these neural pathways that keep running, and I call it our crappy elevator music. And those neural pathways, they just keep running in the background. Those thoughts that run those neural pathways are what are creating those emotions. And so when
Mm.
we go to a new place, those neural pathways just keep running, creating the same emotions. Of course they do, right? I mean, that's what they're
Yeah.
designed to do. And so, unless and until you can change those neural pathways and truly rewire your brain to reach for healthier thoughts, more balanced thoughts, and create new elevator music, you change, and then your
Yeah.
happiness changes.
Yeah. So summarize like them three together. So everything will be like we taking control of our life, right?
Mhm.
So it not only for lawyers, it could be like any person because our listeners could be like anyone. Could be staying a single mom or like a business person or could be a motivational speaker or someone else. Like
Mhm.
everyone could be different. So to summarize them three things we talked about, owning our power, owning our thoughts, and owning our own happiness would be like taking control of our life. If boss saying something else in the workplace, an example, we need to speak up. like we have to have like a communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is something is not right. Just can you elaborate? Right.
Yeah, and I love that example. And again, this came up just last night with a client.
Yeah.
We were talking about how when your boss yells at you, and says like you're an idiot, that shouldn't have happened. And these conversations happen in
Yeah.
practicing law. People will tell you you're an idiot, you totally messed up. We can take that and internalize it. I'm an idiot, I totally messed up, and it feels
Yeah.
terrible. Or we can let our boss say that and we can decide what we want to make that mean and what we want to think about that, right? That's
Yeah.
the power piece. And then we choose the thought like, he's having a bad day. I don't know what he's mad about. I didn't really miss anything. I don't even know if you read it. Like, you could believe any of those thoughts, choose
Yeah.
any of those thoughts, and then decide from there how you want to show up. But what's really interesting is that as humans, when people do things to us that we think aren't right, we believe they shouldn't treat us that way,
Yeah.
we get really angry. And it's because our thoughts are, he shouldn't treat me like that. He shouldn't yell at me. Like, how dare he? Those thoughts create the anger. And so what I share with my clients is like, look, you can be angry all you want, and you can
Mm.
own that you don't like to be treated that way. But
Yeah.
the only question you have to answer is, how do you want to show up in responding to being treated that way? Because my guess is, however you want to show up, it's not going to be driven by anger. It's
Yeah.
probably going to be driven by a different emotion. And so you have to take your moment, be angry, right? Be righteously mad. Let that move through you. It's a part of life. It's part of your yin and yang.
Yeah.
But know that when you want to have that conversation, it's going to need to be driven by a different emotion. And maybe that's curiosity. Like, I really wonder what's going on with him and why he would talk to me like that. That's going to yield a very different result in your
Yeah.
career, in your relationships, in your life than biting back from anger. And so it's
Yeah.
about also just being mindful of, what space am I operating from? And is that helpful?
Yeah, it's always to find out like what's happening on the other side as well. So
Yeah.
it's not, sometimes it's not personal. Sometimes he had a tough time, like law practice. Probably he went for like working on a client project. It didn't come through like as he wanted,
Mm-hmm.
and yelling at you for not because you haven't did some kind of like a wrong or something. It could be
Yep.
like he had some bad time in the family. So he had an argument with his spouse or like
Yep.
a partner. Then this kind of things they bring into the workplace, and then yell at you. So like all the time, like having a conversation with the person to find out actually is there something I did wrong, or like you having a bad time. Having a
Yeah.
communication is really solve the problem, right?
Yeah. And I think that's a really important insight, right? And, it's always the solution is to
Yeah.
communicate and be open and be curious. But, it's also important to allow yourself to be angry and just recognize like it's okay for me to be mad, but I'm not going to have a conversation from that place. Because I
Yeah.
get a lot of people will say, well, I'm just supposed to be a doormat and let people treat me terribly. It's like, that's not the
Yeah.
message. The message is, take your anger, process it, own it, reflect on it, but recognize that if you want to be curious and you want to have that conversation, anger is not going to be invited to that discussion. It's just not conducive.
Yeah, it's going to make it worse, the situation, right?
Totally. And
Yeah.
I think as women and myself, included early on, people say things, you get sexually harassed, people make
Yeah.
innuendos, you get angry and you want to be angry. Like, I don't want to feel good about
Yeah.
that stuff. But just recognizing that it was okay to be angry and I could be angry, but then also choose to show up calm and clear. That was kind of mind blowing
Yeah.
to me. Perfect. Wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, definitely like owning our what we talk and finding out doesn't really need to be like losing our self-confidence and self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have a balance out. And sometimes like even though having a communication, the problem not going to be solved. Some boss or some manager are going to be like a different, and they're never going to be changed. They're going to harass you, they're going to bully
Yes.
you, and they're going to like overpower you all the time. So then kind of like change need to be doing. So you have to like have a like observation time, think about it, like how's the process is going, and finding out like what you want to do about it. sometimes
Yeah.
communication not the solution.
Yeah, I love the observation piece of it. And I don't often use that word, but I think it's a good one that I will start implementing, because I think what's really interesting about other people is that whenever we're struggling with someone, whether it's a boss or a spouse or whomever, it's almost always rooted in a belief that they're supposed to be acting differently, that I know how they're supposed to be acting, that
Yeah,
I know what they're supposed to be doing. And, none of us like to be controlled or told how we're supposed to act or
yeah,
told what we're supposed to do. But we have all these ideas about what other people are supposed to do and how they're supposed to act. And that causes this great amount of conflict.
mm,
But instead, if we can just let the people be who they are and just choose what we want to believe about it, it changes the dynamics of our relationships, and just assuming that people are going to continue to be who they are.
yeah,
If you have a boss that's kind of a jerk and he's always yelling at you, it's not helpful to
yeah,
be angry about that. You feel terrible. He doesn't feel your anger, and he's probably going to continue being who he is and being angry.
yeah.
It's so much better just to get to a place where it's like, okay, my boss is going to be angry. He's probably going to yell at me. That's what he does. What do I want to believe about that? Instead of sitting here being angry about the person that he is and wishing he would change, because that feels terrible.
Yeah, if it's not a healthy workplace, then obviously need to make some changes, definitely, because you can't control the other person, how he's
Right.
gonna be like, how he's gonna treat you, and you can't change him as a person because they're gonna be like that. But yeah, like we mentioned and we talked about, have a communication, try to solve it. If it doesn't solve,
Hmm.
then we have to move on and find out like what works best for you as an individual, right?
Yeah, it's about kind of, making that request and setting that boundary. If you have a
Yeah,
boss that yells at you all the time, we get to decide and own that power and just, make a decision whether or not we want to be in a place where it's
yeah,
okay for someone to treat us like that. That's our choice. Or we can say, if you're going to yell at me, I'm going to walk out of the room and I'll
yeah,
come back in an hour, or I'm not going to work with you, right? Like those are the boundaries that we set. It's about what we will do when someone kind of violates our personal space or our comfort
mhm,
level. It's not about trying to convince them to stop yelling. It's not about lecturing them on being somebody better. It's like, okay, well, you get to be you.
yeah,
But if you do that, I'm just gonna walk away. Like I'm not mad at you. We're not gonna fight, but I'm gonna leave and
yeah,
then I'll check in with you later. It brings the whole energy of it down so much.
yeah, absolutely. So to you work with your clients, you work with a lot of women attorneys.
Mhm.
How the process really actually works? So how do you train them on a mindset, change their mindset? Um, can you just walk us through a little bit about like how your program works? So get the idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually, so I have kind of an idea how I would ideally work with a client.
Yeah,
But what I have found is that oftentimes when people come to me, they're kind of pulling their hair out. They're at the end of their rope. They're about ready to quit, or implement the rage quit, as I say, where they're just
yeah,
done and they just quit and they're out. So sometimes, more, I should say more often than not, when they come to me, they've got something top of mind and they want to coach on it. And they
yeah,
don't want me to lecture them or teach them about theory. They want to execute. And
mhm,
so with those clients, that is absolutely an option. And so what we'll do is we'll coach on what's top of mind for them. And they schedule as needed. And we kind of work through, what's their ultimate goal? Where are they wanting to go? And we'll strategize around it. In doing that, we're going to weave in everything that I believe and that I've shared with you. We're going to explore
yeah,
their thinking, how they're showing up. That's probably the most common scenario. I do have some clients that they want structure. They want to show up and they want me to have a plan, in
right,
which case I have modules that I'll work them through that really explore all of these parts of my practice, your thinking, your beliefs, processing emotion and the value of negative emotion, finding your purpose, things like that. And so we'll work through it in a more structured manner and apply that to challenges that they're having. But because their needs are kind of wide and varied, for the clients that just want to coach on the hot topic,
yeah,
all of my teachings are available. I have videos and readings and worksheets that will go through all of those modules so that maybe when things calm down for them, they can access them on their own time. One thing about lawyers is that, time it's a very important resource. They bill by the minute, they track their time. And so giving them the opportunity to coach and access resources in the way that best suits them, I found it is really the best. And so that way they can kind of do it in the way that works for them when they have the time. And if they just want to coach on what's top of mind, that's fine too. So we're kind of all across the board, really.
Yeah, and in terms of like the process, like how long it actually takes, like do you have any time frame for them to make the change?
Yeah, my strong recommendation for the women that I work with, or anyone that I work with, is 6 months. A 6-month investment, I think, is really what is needed to really start practicing this stuff, develop some new neural pathways, and start seeing changes. Over that 6-month period, we could meet once a month, we could meet twice a month, or we could meet over 18 sessions, and you can kind of spread it out as needed. I think the real sweet spot is to do every 2 weeks over 6 months, and then have 6 sessions you can kind of spread out as needed over those remaining 6 months. And so it's like a year investment, I think, is the total package. But at a minimum, 6 months and 12 sessions, I think, is really where I see the growth. I do have some individuals that want just 1 session, or they'll want just 6 sessions, and they'll meet, every week for 6 weeks. They always come back because it's just the tip of the iceberg. And the more you open yourself up to this work, the more it's like, well, what about this? And what about this? Or I'm learning this about myself, and how do I unpack that? And it kind of compounds. And so I always worry when someone comes in thinking it's going to be kind of a quick fix, 6 sessions or 1 session, in and out, and everything's going to be better. And it's like, this is truly, the work of a lifetime, and you're really setting the foundation to be somebody different forever from here on out, and really asking yourself, that's a big investment, and that's worth 6 months or a year of your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Changing some, like your long-term career, like 30, 40 years, you're going to be in the same career, investing 6 months, and like even though 1 year, like finding out actually who you are and everything, what step you need to be doing. This is a great solution. For me, it's like a no-brainer, to be honest. So like those who work with you, like you worked in the past, does they actually have to leave their job to make the changes, or they stayed in the same workplace and made the change within themselves? How did that change happen with your clients?
Yeah, it's probably 50-50. Whenever I find someone who's at the end of their rope and they're ready to jump ship, I always really encourage them to stay, because whatever it is that's pushing them to leave, it's going to follow them wherever they go. And when they're in it, when they're in the thick of it and they're really struggling with it, that's when the best work happens. And so oftentimes people will come and will work on setting boundaries, owning their thoughts, owning their power, taking control over what they want, and will do it in the space that they're in. Probably 50%, it's probably 50-50. The other 50% are working to transition. And so we'll help them get happier where they are and get some clarity where they are, because they need to take the temperature down a little bit before they can really make good decisions about what's next. Otherwise, they're just like frenzied panic running to like the next thing that comes. And so I think for both of them, it's always, we settle down, we get some clarity. And so even the ones that are leaving, the work is very similar, because it doesn't take very long in a new environment for those neural pathways to come back up, and you find yourself lashing out and being frustrated and feeling the same way. And so then, off we go and the work begins. But I truly think it's best when they're just like right at the end of their rope and really struggling. It can be the most powerful.
Yes, that's great. So yeah, we are running out of our time for this podcast. It's really, really great. So those who listening, if anyone wants to work with you, because probably we have few attorneys probably watching this. So if anyone wants to work with you or like get some advice from you, how they can reach out to you.
Yeah. So the best place to go is my website, autumnnoble.com. That's AUTUMNNOBLE.com. And then my blog is theuncomfortabledream.com. From there, you'll find all my social media, the Lawyer Life Collective, But that's really probably the best place to start. From there, you can grab a free consult is typically the first step to working with me. I want to make sure that I'm the right fit. I want to make sure the clients are the right fit. And so that's just an hour where we do some coaching, we get a sense of your goals. So that's always the first step. And that's all available on my website, autumnnoble.com.
Yeah, thank you so much, Autumn, for taking the time out and sharing your experiences and what you're actually doing for like attorneys, which is really, really helpful for our audience. They can relate to their professional life and business or career, whatever they're actually doing. So I really appreciate for coming to our show, and I wish you good luck with your career and life.
Likewise. Thanks so much for having me, Russell. I hope to see you again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Autumn. So this is a wrap, guys. So I'm going to see you on next episode. Till then, stay safe, stay healthy. Take care.